Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a town hall with Council members Jim Oddie and Malia Vella. I'm Sarah Henry, the city's public information officer, and I'll help moderate today's event. Council members Oddie and Vella invited special guests, Assemblymember Rob Bonta and Stephen Dial, CEO of A New America, to join us today. Please note, all participants have been muted. To submit a question, please use the chat feature. Following remarks by our speakers, they'll be available to answer your questions. I'd now like to turn the town hall over to Alameda Council members Jim Oddie and Malia Vella.
Are you going first, Malia, or you want me to?
Oh.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. As you probably know, Councilmember Vella and I are doing these weekly calls with guests who can provide background information and answer questions to anyone regarding the current COVID-19 crisis. Last week, we had a guest from the school board, and we talked about some of the issues with linked learning. We're also doing every Wednesday after the council meeting kind of a brief update in case folks aren't able to see those meetings. We've taken a lot of steps to help protect our tenants, protect our residents, protect our businesses. One of the things that keeps coming up is, what other assistance might be out there for our small businesses. And, the federal government passed some legislation last week, so maybe our assembly member can talk about that, even though it's technically not state related. But there are also a host of state programs that provide assistance to small businesses. So we decided we would bring two guests on this week, our assembly member who actually represents us at the state, and Stephen, who works in the small business, for a small business nonprofit, that's also good at getting money out to small businesses. So how we'll do this, we'll let them each have a few minutes to make a presentation, and then we'll answer some questions. And then if anyone has any city-related questions for Councilmember Vella and I, then we can get into those afterwards. And I'll just turn it over to Councilmember Vella to introduce the rest of the folks.
Yeah, and just to build off what Councilmember Oddie said, this week the council took a couple actions to help our small businesses here in Alameda. One was to direct staff to reallocate some funding to create a fund to give $7,500 grants to some of our small businesses with 1 to 25 employees. We've also given a little bit of direction to staff regarding tentative plans for rent abatement out at Alameda Point and for City of Alameda tenants, and in the hopes of giving them a little more time to figure out how that would work, we've decided to defer rents for another 60 days. So it was 30 days originally, and then we added another 60 days, so it's for a total of 90 days. And so we're really hoping that everyone else will join us. Obviously, there's different grants through the SBA. We've also given direction around creating a public-private partnership to try to help continue funding, because we don't think the grants, the $7,500 grants that we're going to do is going to be enough for our small businesses. So I think today is really focused on how we can work together with the state of California to make sure that all of our small businesses receive the help that they need. So with that, I will turn it over to our assembly member, Rob Bonta.
Okay, there I am. Thanks, Ms. Henry. Proud to be on this panel with Mr. Dial as well. And just a huge thanks to Council members Oddie and Vella for your extraordinary efforts. This is just one of the incidents, examples of it, of communicating to your constituents and taking action to support them in these unprecedented times. So really appreciate you, appreciate this partnership as well, the ability to work together as city leaders and state leaders, nonprofit leaders to come together. This is a time when it's all hands on deck and we all need to be working together. It's what our constituents expect of us. It's what they deserve. And we all kind of have different parts of a layered solution where we can work together and put the puzzle pieces together to help make sure everyone has what they need. So just want to start off with a huge thanks and appreciation for the opportunity to be on this panel. Thanks for those participants who are listening in. I'll just share a couple of highlights. And first, I'll just express my wishes that you are all healthy and safe and well, all things considered. We know these are unprecedented times. We've never been through something like this, most of us, and we are no strangers to adversity and no strangers to overcoming adversity as well. So I know that we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. And one of the key components is communication around the services that are being provided and offered, where it's really happening in real time. You know, each day, the federal government, the state government, city leaders are trying to identify what the biggest needs are, the most vulnerable, who the most vulnerable communities are, and how to help them. And we've done quite a lot at the state level. I just want to touch on a couple of the areas we've been supporting our schools and our parents and our students as we've moved from on-site, school site learning to distance learning. And I know that's been difficult as a parent of 2 kids in public schools in AUSD. I'm experiencing the challenges, but also trying to embrace the opportunity to do the ongoing learning. We've supported our tenants, our homeowners. We've kept utilities on. We've prevented evictions and foreclosures. We've provided support for our small businesses. We've provided support for our frontline essential workers who are just heroes in terms of what they're doing in the healthcare space, or providing our food supply chain, keeping that going, or our first responders. The list goes on. Usually from our federal support and solutions, undocumented Californians are left out, and California has stepped into that breach and provided support for our undocumented neighbors. We've had challenges around our healthcare infrastructure as we've anticipated the surge, and we've spent a lot of time identifying personal protective equipment and enough beds, enough healthcare workers, enough ventilators to make sure that we're ready. And we've hammered home the message that 6 feet of physical distancing is critical, as well as honoring that shelter in place. And it's really made a difference. I mean, it's been up to the actions and decisions of 40 million Californians to follow these rules. That collective action is always hard, but in large part, we've done it. And especially in the Bay Area, we're coming on 6 weeks of shelter in place this Monday. And it's been a haul, but it's also paid off. It's paying off. It's not past tense yet. We're in the middle of it. We need to stay the course. A lot of people have had questions around assistance. I'm happy to answer any questions that come in through the chat box. I do want to mention that there has been some concern around voting and what elections look like. We are having special elections in May, where we are going to mandatory sending out of absentee ballots to every eligible voter, whether you've asked for it or not, whether you're a vote by mail voter or not. And I think that that's going to provide a good roadmap for how we have an election in November that both allows people to protect their health and their fundamental right to vote. We'll also have, I think, 20 days of early voting so that folks can get into those polling stations without crowds and can have a voting experience with physical distancing. So I just want to touch on a number of areas at the outset, and just want to say we're here to help. Sometimes the policies and the concepts that we implement make sense, but when you're trying to access them, and it's a little harder, whether it be EDD or a small business loan or grant, or getting the forbearance on your student loan or your rent or your mortgage or whatever it might be. So we want to help you. We pride ourselves in providing individualized support, so reach out to our office. And just another huge thanks for our partners, Ms. Henry and Mr. Dial, and Councilmembers Vella and Oddie, for the opportunity to be here together. Thank you.
And Mr. Dial?
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the council members for the invitation and thank the assembly member also. And just a little heads up, I have a special affiliation for the city of Alameda. I'm a former resident. I lived in Alameda for over 14 years. I remember when there was a Lions on Shoreline Drive, so I'm dating myself. A New America, we are a 20-year-old nonprofit here in the Bay Area. Our primary mission is to work with underserved communities leveraging entrepreneurship. We also have what's called 2 women's business centers, and they are in part funded by the SBA and through expansion efforts, also in part funded by GoBiz, or the Office of Economic Development and Business for the state of California. We have been heavily involved in terms of technical assistance regarding some of the different programs, both at the federal level and the state level, in terms of trying to counsel and connect businesses with resources. On a personal note, just as many nonprofits, though we may not be in business for profit, we do run a business. And we are experiencing the same concerns, fears as for-profit businesses. So in terms of cash flow, in terms of our ability to access different programs. So when I speak, I'm not only speaking from the sense of a resource provider, I'm also speaking from someone who has responsibility of a business and of employees, and who's also navigating this situation. Today, just wanted to touch on some of the resources that are at the state level. And it's just really important that businesses at this time really look at the broad ranges of resources that are available. Because I think for most, the most immediate is cash flow, is figuring out how much do you need for the next 3 months, 4 months, in order to keep your business going and to try to maybe avoid going to a plan B and a plan C. So it's important to see what resources are out there and the best way, to take advantage of them. So at the state level, for those that collect, sales tax and use tax and have annual sales under 5 million, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, they have set up their business relief payment plan. What that will allow a business to do is that they can take advantage of using a 12-month payment plan that's interest-free. And it can be up to $50,000 of your sales and tax liability. So again, what this will allow a business to do is to have access to cash flow. So in order to take advantage of this right now, if you go to the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration site, there is a fill out this form hyperlink, and you would need to complete that to let them know that you want to participate in the program. And in the coming weeks, they do plan to have an online process for this. But again, for right now, you should go there and fill out the form, submit it to them. The other thing that is available is through the iBank, or the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. They have created a disaster loan program for those businesses impacted by COVID-19. Some of the eligibility requirements, of course, the business has to be in California. You can have between 1 to 750 employees. Also, what's important about this program is that those businesses or business owners who may not be eligible at the federal level for various reasons, they can apply through here. So for example, businesses involved in the cannabis industry. At the federal level, for the PPP, for the EIDL loan, they are not eligible because at the federal level, they're still considered to be against the law at the federal level. The iBank is an option for those businesses. So again, this is something that businesses may want to look at. The way that it works is that the state guarantees to the participating lender like 95% of the loan. They also guarantee it for a 7-year period. What that does, that helps that specific lender be a bit flexible in terms of taking on, that new asset. So the way that it works is that if you go to the iBank site, they have a step-by-step process. You would contact a participating lender, just as, a heads up. They are looking to expand the participating lender list, and I believe it's going to be forthcoming. Also, there is what's called finance development corporations. There are about 7 of them that are listed, where you can contact them, number one, to get assistance in terms of preparing the loan, but also to verify current participating lenders. So that is, an option. And again, I would just say that, they are working to expand the list of participating lenders on this program. The other important service is, through the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, so GoBiz. So the link that I have given there, they really try to compile every resource that, small businesses need at this time. And I think one of the resources that is important to think about participating in is they have initiated entrepreneurship task force that is compiled of not only government representatives, but also business owners. And on a bi-weekly basis, they have webinars. And a lot of it is, how do people not only get through this time, but how are you going to pivot? Because when the stay of order is listed, we're all going to be in a new reality. And businesses kind of need to start thinking about, how am I going to operate? So that's a resource that I would strongly suggest that you use. The last one is our site. We have a specific COVID-19 site. We try to keep it up to date. One resource that we have there under other potential financial assistance, i.e. loans or grants, is a list of different entities that may be giving grants at this time. And again, as a small business, I would suggest to really take a look at that, because there are entities that are having small grants up to $10,000. But again, it's important because you want to try to use every resource that's possible, especially if you're looking, how do I get enough cash flow to get me through the next few months. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Well, thanks for those, that overview. Sarah, I have a couple questions, but do you have any from any of our listeners?
I have a few, but why don't you go ahead and then I'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, the first one, we've reviewed a lot of the different proposals and assistance programs, and even in our city's assistance program, one of the factors is the number of employees, but there's a lot of, one-woman shops or one-man shops. I think about attorneys, hairdressers, massage therapists, folks not part of the gig economy, but, they have their own business and they've had probably a downward trend in income. So are there any programs out there to assist folks that work for themselves and maybe just have a one-woman shop or one-man shop?
The most popular programs are at the federal level. So both the PPP, which takes into account independent contractors and self-employed, and also through the EIDL loan, once it resumes, that also has a route, for the self-employed, no employees.
Okay, and then another question, the city, I think it was through DABA, has weekly business town halls, and one of the issues that came up last week consistently was the issue of commercial tenants being able to pay back any rent. The plan we put in place in Alameda was a 6-month payback, and if you think about a 3-month deferral, and then they have to start paying it back, on month 1, it's like 1.5 times their normal rent, and I'm not sure how many businesses are going to be able to afford that in their first month, reopening. And the problem that we have as local electeds and local policymakers is we're not allowed to regulate commercial rent. So I wonder what actions, if any, or what thoughts the folks at the state have to try to find some relief for these commercial tenants who are going to be suffering when rents come due.
All right. I think you can hear me now. Let me also just to answer your former question first around gig economy workers, independent contractors, self-employed, the EDD unemployment insurance program. The traditional program that we have is for the employees in an employee-employer relationship, but the federal stimulus package did provide for support, as Mr. Dial said, for those who are independent contractors. It's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, and it's taken some time, to be honest, for the federal government and the state to align and sync up. We've been working on a website for applications at the state level. Labor Secretary Julie Sue has been hard at work on it, and I think by mid this coming week, you'll be able to apply for assistance. You'll get benefits similar to what an employee gets. And you should be able to get the check should be able to get into the mail within 24 hours to 48 hours of application. So that is coming soon. It's a long time coming. I know it's not soon enough for folks, but we've been trying to work out the layer of government challenge and get that website ready so that it can be quickly turned around. So when I maybe 7-8 weeks ago, as we were moving into this crisis, I put together a bill called the COVID-19 Relief Act that identified all the areas that I and my staff, and frankly, my constituents who were co-thinking solutions with me, identified for help. A lot of those have been put into place through executive order and through our communication to the governor through executive order, support for tenants, having educational funding flow, keeping utilities on, et cetera. But one of the areas that we still need to provide support on is the issue that Councilmember Oddie has identified. We asked for it a number of weeks ago, but the idea of providing support for our small businesses in the form of loans and small low interest loans and zero interest loans, those have come about. But the idea of mortgages and payments and rent payments is something that Senator Wiener has been asking for, I've been asking for, and we know that we still want to try to get a solution to. Part of all of these forbearance solutions, part of what they don't answer is the question of if you pay and when you pay the payments you're forborne from paying. So if you don't have to pay rent for 90 days, for example, do you need to pay? Do they all stack up and you have to pay them on the 120th day after we're out of the crisis? Do they get added on to the end of your mortgage payments? Or do you get a payment plan if you're a tenant? People aren't, if they don't have the money now, they're not going to have it in 120 days either. So that's a next step solution that we need to answer. But I think it is appropriate now, Councilmember Oddie, to provide all impacted entities and people relief from payment now if they can't pay because of the COVID-19 crisis, and to give them a fair opportunity to pay or to consider waiving those payments and maybe having the government step in to make sure that the person or entity to whom those payments go to, which could be a small business or a mom and pop, that they're not hurt either.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that's an area we hear about time and time again. So the next point I wanted to make, one's kind of maybe a lessons learned, and it doesn't really relate to business, but I think we've seen the whole issue of SNFs and nursing homes and just issues there with the health and safety that I hope that the state can look at, because this has exposed kind of the weaknesses in a lot of those places to see the virus spread as quickly as it did. So I hope that's something they look at. But I know that you represent, as I used to say, Oakland, San Leandro, and the great city of Alameda. Can you talk about anything you might be doing coming up with the three mayors of those three great cities?
Well, that would be a great idea, to do something with the mayors of those three great cities. They're all great cities. And I'm doing a teletown hall this Wednesday, April 29th, 4:30 to 5:30, with the mayors of the three cities that make up the 18th Assembly District: Mayor Libby Schaaf in Oakland, Mayor Ashcraft in Alameda, and Mayor Cutter in San Leandro. So it'll be a nice opportunity to have all the mayors there at once talking about the efforts at the city level, the city initiatives that they're involved in to provide support during the COVID-19 crisis.
I mean, I know the mayors have been quite active, and our mayor in particular has done an amazing job making sure that our residents have what they need and getting information out there. So big kudos to her. I think we had a question from Kathy. Sarah, maybe you might want to read that, because I think that's kind of a timely and a new issue that we didn't have until like a day or two ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was announced just yesterday, the Restaurants Deliver program, assembly member, and so which is home meals for seniors, where basically the businesses, local businesses are commissioned essentially to then provide meals for seniors. And so we were just wondering if there was any additional information about that program.
Yeah, so the governor in California made an announcement maybe a week or so ago, conceptualizing this idea as California was having productive conversations with FEMA, who is the federal government is paying for 75% of the cost of this program, and it provides 3 nutritional meals a day to seniors. And it's really innovative and thoughtful in my view, because it addresses 2 problems at once: the need for isolated seniors to receive a nutritional meal that's low in sodium and low in high fructose, and that's nutritious and hopefully organic and is more sort of farm to table. And then it also allows for economic activity around our struggling restaurant and culinary industry that have been hit hard by the COVID-19 crisis. It allows for them to prepare and deliver these meals and to be reimbursed for that. And then it provides, of course, the economic activity in the local jurisdictions, cities and counties, who will get revenue from it. So it's kind of a 3-for, and that's the concept. It's been launched. I have had questions already about how, if you're a restaurant and you want to participate, how you can. If you're a city and you want to get, you want to partner with FEMA in this program, how you can do that. And I don't have all that information this second for the how we can connect you, but we will work on connecting you. That's our job. So if the city is interested in participating, my district director, Tanya Love, is participating right now in this Zoom call with us, and she will follow up either directly with Sarah or council members Oddie or Vella with the information you need to participate in what I think is a wonderful program, and all cities who want to should be able to participate.
That's great. Here's another question. What would it take to have an all mail-in election in November?
I think Rob needs to be, the assembly member needs to be unmuted.
I got him. Hold on. There you go.
Awesome. I'm the worst unmuter. Don't judge me by my skills at unmuting and muting myself. I think we're pretty close to that now. The special elections that we're having in May will be a good test run of automatic vote by mail ballots being sent out, whether you ask for it or not. The Secretary of State is doing that. He wants to do that. The governor has issued an executive order requiring that. And that has been California's approach. California, as you know, is a no excuse vote by mail state, meaning anyone who wants to vote by mail can. You don't have to provide an excuse meaning you have to demonstrate that you're going to be out of state or unable to vote at the polls. If you want to, you can. More and more Californians, certainly more and more Alamedans, are voting in that way. It's convenient. It's a little easier. But some people like me like to go to the polls. They like the ceremony of it. Some need that language access or the disability access. Some folks who don't have an address where they can send a VBM, a vote by mail ballot to, need to vote at the polls. And so that's why we have as a backup proposal the option of voting at the polls early for 20 days prior to. And the idea of 20 days of early voting is sort of the same idea as flattening the curve. Instead of having a surge come into the hospital all at one time, you spread it out, and you spread out the sort of number of voters who come into the polls over time, over multiple days, so that instead of standing in line on election day within 6 feet of each other and crowded shoulder to shoulder inside the polling station, they can actually vote comfortably, safely, when they want, sometimes even doing it by themselves. When I voted early in Alameda for one of our elections, I was the only person in the polling station. So California is probably the least of our worries. We have a Secretary of State who is on this, Secretary of State Alex Padilla, a governor who believes in it, legislature who's been fighting for this approach for a long time. It's the states like Wisconsin where we have challenges and where we did have challenges. And so there's federal efforts to require funding to states throughout the United States to have similar implementations of vote by mail and early voting. And there's legislation asking for that to happen so that no one has to choose between their public health and their fundamental right to vote.
Thank you. I think this next comment is for our council members. They're saying most leases contain force majeure clauses that provide remedies for situations like this. Also, many businesses will have business interruption coverage under their commercial policies. This is potentially force majeure could relieve obligation to pay rent altogether.
You want to start, Malia, or
Hold on.
I can chime in after? Or... You're muted.
I'm trying.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Sorry. So I think we've, Councilmember Oddie and I have discussed, I think, on another town hall that, you know, this is the first time that we're seeing those clauses really, you know, come into discussion. I think there have been a lot of, in law school, you review them, you know that they exist. They're in a lot of contracts that you see, but this is kind of an unprecedented situation, and obviously there's going to be questions of whether or not that clause comes into play. I think you know, as a large landlord in the city of Alameda, the city certainly is trying to work with our tenants to you know, figure out what is possible, what people can pay. I think that a lot of this is going to be about finding ways, to the assembly member's point, if people can't pay now, they're not going to be able to necessarily pay in 120 days or 90 days. And so a lot of this is about trying to work together to see what is possible and what's in the best interest of both parties long term. And so, you know, I think to that end, a lot of this is about, you know, the working with each tenant, working with each company that might be having issues, and trying to figure out how we can make things sustainable in the long term for everyone.
And I'll just add, I mean, to the extent that question asks for legal advice, I'm not going to give it because no one here is my client. But I will say from my personal experience, you know, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we would just breeze by those clauses in our contracts. And, you know, now we all look at them. And I had a potential customer that, you know, we spent 15 minutes talking about it on a call last week, and, you know, something we never did before. On the business interruption, I have read that there may be some concerns that carriers, you know, like they're prone to do, might try to avoid coverage. So I wonder if maybe Assemblymember Bonta can add something about maybe what our insurance commissioner, Mr. Lara, might be interested in doing. So the issue was, you know, business interruption insurance. If, you know, if the carriers are declining to provide, you know, whether it's lost profits or rental coverage for businesses, and what the state might be able to do to help businesses who are facing that from their insurance carriers.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Lara recently had a town hall where he was answering questions about insurance, and you know, one of the things that we saw is sometimes we see the insurance market move on its own, and there were some early movers in the automobile insurance space, Allstate, and then others who decreased premiums because folks were staying home and not in their cars, and the chances and the possibility of accidents and need for coverage was much lowered. I thought that was the right thing to do. It was a good thing to do. We can argue about how much the premium should have been lowered, but the fact that they lowered it and that they did it on their own was good. And then Mr. Lara moved into that space, and I think he made more uniform the percentage and who it applied to. And on this specific question, I know that the insurance commissioner is involved, and we can connect any folks with specific questions to him to provide that linkage between our local leaders and our state leaders.
And your staff is still on the job, so maybe if you want to give some emails for Tanya or Jane. Everyone probably knows Jane. He just recently came over to your office from Barbara Lee, and he covers Alameda. Maybe you can provide that info.
And I'll also just share that my district director, Tanya Love, is on this call, as I mentioned before, and she's responding with follow-ups, filling some of the gaps that I'm leaving with my responses. She's already shared in the chat box for those participating some additional information on the Pandemic Employment Assistance Program, some information about the restaurant meals for seniors. And Tanya, I know you can hear me if you have anything else on this question of insurance coverage and Insurance Commissioner Lada's efforts. Why don't we put that in the chat box as well?
I think that's a good segue. I know I've reached out to Tanya on behalf of some of our shared constituents who have had some questions regarding EDD. I know that there's a delay with EDD assembly member, and that there have been, the governor has added more hours to their call-in, to their call lines, and that on the 28th, there will be a new ability for folks who are self-employed to apply through EDD. Do you mind speaking a little bit about the state's, if there are any additional plans to help kind of with the backlog around EDD? I've heard from some shared constituents that they haven't been able to log in, or they haven't had a response. If you could talk a little bit about that. And I do want to thank your district director, Tanya Love, and your staff. They've been very responsive when people have called up your office to get help.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Probably this is the area of biggest frustration from constituents. We know it's a challenge. The way I look at it is it's, when this crisis hit, there was massive volume in service areas that we hadn't been ready for in that split second, but that we have recognized and owned the fact that we weren't ready and taken steps to be ready. That happened with our healthcare infrastructure, getting enough beds, getting enough workers, getting enough PPE, getting enough ventilators, and we're doing it now with EDD as well. Already we've had more claims since the crisis started than we had in the entirety of 2019. In 2019, we had the economy was strong, so EDD claims were low. We had a call center that was open for, I think it was 3 hours a day, 9 to 12, and we know we have to change all that. And so we now have the call center is open 12 hours a day. That's for folks who really want and need a live person to help them work through their challenges. We do have the internet portal still available, and it's better if you can navigate that to apply through the portal and get all your information submitted that way. And we have already issued $3.9 billion in unemployment insurance checks and I think it's 39 million different checks. Maybe I'm getting those wrong, but it's just an incredibly unprecedented number of checks, the amount of money that's been sent out. And so it's this huge tsunami of need, and getting the infrastructure up and ready has been slower than Californians deserve, slower than is needed, but it's also recognized that it needs to change. And we've had thousands more workers being trained up to be responsive on the EDD side, changing the nature of their work to be to provide the need that Californians need right now in EDD. And the more call hours, and then this portal that's opening on Tuesday should really help for the pandemic unemployment assistance. So we as a representative of the state, I apologize for to everyone who's had a tough time breaking through. That's not the level of customer service that we strive for, that we know that you deserve, and we're working to improve it, and we will.
Thank you. Another question that's been raised. I know that obviously the various Bay Area counties have put into place a requirement that everyone wear a face covering while they're out. That includes standing in line to enter a grocery store when you go to pick up food. There's also a requirement, when you're out, obviously. There's certain exemptions that allow for people to not have to wear them when they're exercising. Is there any plan to expand that beyond the Bay Area counties, or to have that statewide?
I know that it's being considered. I don't know that it's imminent. The way a lot of the executive orders and the public health orders have been, they've been bottom up. And I've been really proud of Alameda County and the 6 Bay Area counties that acted first 6 weeks ago this Monday to have the first shelter in place order. It was striking for so many of us, this idea of staying home and what it means and sheltering in place and physical distancing. We all learned that real time together. But we've all also enacted it and showed why we did it. And there was a recent article that showed that the Bay Area is not just flattening the curve, we're crushing it. And so, it's almost a flat curve. And then the second shelter in place order that came out after the first was even more restrictive, and in terms of what's an essential activity and what's not, what's allowed, what's not. And then this mask order, which is exactly the way you described it. I think my view has always been, you'll never regret doing too much to be safe and acting too early. You can always dial it back. You don't want to be reckless, but if you're in doubt and there is a sound public health argument, I think we should do it, because you can save a life, and every life that you can save is worth it. But the governor has been a little reluctant to impose statewide orders, and he's often said that the local control is definitive, and then he stepped in to fill the gaps when necessary, like when folks were at too many beaches and too many parks, and he shut down the parking lots, or he allowed cities first to organically do their implement their shelter in place orders, and then 3 days later he shut down. He applied it to the whole state and had the shelter in place statewide. So it could happen, but my guess, this is me, I'm hypothesizing based on where we are with respect to our curve. I think we've been beating our projections, meaning we're doing better than we thought. We know we're still in the middle of it, but the fact that we're talking about the 6 indicators to come out of shelter in place orders, what we need, one of them being more expansive testing, and we're working on a more expansive testing, where we are talking about getting restaurants to work through this 3 meal a day program for seniors. We are providing for scheduled essential surgeries to come back into our hospitals, where before we were pushing those off so that we had enough beds for our, in our IC unit and for our COVID-19 patients. So we're starting to ease slowly. So my guess is we'll stay the course with what we have. But if something happens, and this weekend, it's a beautiful weekend, maybe people are out, maybe they're a little, get a little comfortable with where we've been and forget the discipline that required us to get us here. If something happens and we have a spike, I can see us going, statewide with a mask and facial covering rule. But I think it's based on sort of Californians' collective behavior.
I want to follow up on that, if I can. We all, we love our freedom in this country, and one of those freedoms is to move, and now that's all restricted. And besides the public health, I think there's a potential mental health component to that folks that may not be used to that, it just may be causing a lot of issues. And my first question is, one, what is the state looking at that and seeing if there's any more resources they could provide? Because I know our school district is working on that. Gray Harris talked about that on Wednesday when we talked to her, but I worry about that's already an unfunded service. And then secondary to that, I almost forgot my question, but I think I'll come back to that, because I'll let you answer that while I remember the second half.
Yeah, there's been a lot of unintended consequences to the shelter in place orders. From an epidemiological perspective, from addressing an international pandemic, sheltering in place staying at home, maintaining that physical distance is paramount. You know, epidemiologists sort of unanimously agree that if we could freeze every person on Earth for 2 weeks, 6 feet apart from one another, COVID-19 would sputter out and die, and we could move forward. All these orders, physical distancing, shelter in place, is a second best to that. It's the best proxy to that ideal. But there are unintended consequences, massive unintended consequences for the worse on the economy, unintended consequences on mental health. You know, a lot of us maybe, you know, in our community networks or in our families, you know, personally experiencing that. You know, it's been really hard on my teenage daughter to not have the social support of her friends and that interaction. I know I'm not alone in saying that. And so that has been a priority, Councilmember Oddie. And part of it has been identifying hotlines for folks where they can get services and they know that they're not alone, where they can get mental health treatment or support with anxiety or depression. One of the horrible unintended consequences have been a spike in domestic violence from these stay-home orders and providing resources for support and access to shelters. And then one of the interesting things that we've seen is people with need on the one hand, and then people who really have an instinctive desire to help and show that California spirit and that good-heartedness, and how we connect them. So we have websites like Californians for All, which allow for people who want to volunteer and step up and call their neighbor and say, hey, you know, someone who cares about you and thinks about you is here. You're not alone. You need some social interaction. You want to chat. We can do that. You know, we're social people, and being alone in our houses is not our natural state of being. We thrive on and get healthy from that interaction. So you're right to say that, and I think there are some steps in place, but as always, it's balancing the public physical health with the public mental health, and also the public health with the economic health, and trying to strike that right balance. I think we can have some debates about, but it's not a blind spot. It's something that we're aware of, and we're providing resources to address.
I appreciate that. I mean, you touched on domestic violence. That was the second part of the question. You know, when you said it, I remembered it. But you know, one thing I did want to add, I think I noticed you posted something about the IRS stimulus checks. And I know if anyone had issues with getting an error message over the first week or 2 weeks, a lot of those have been resolved. So go in and check your status. And you know, if you may have thought you were ineligible, or you may have thought you were eligible and the IRS was telling you you're not, you know, go back in there. And I think they worked out some of those kinks. So just letting people know that, you know, that website, they're still doing stuff this weekend, according to Barbara Lee's office, but you know, keep checking once a day and get your information in there.
I think this question would probably go to Stephen Dial. This person says that they haven't heard back from their lender regarding the PPP. And so if they don't hear back from their lender by next Monday, can they apply for EDD PUA as a sole proprietor?
So for the PPP, if their financial institution accepted the application and the situation is they have yet to hear back, I would strongly suggest that they try on Monday to see what the status is. If they can't get a clear status, then they may want to pursue with another participating lender. Thing to think about in terms of unemployment and under the pandemic unemployment assistance is that I would, first of all, I'm going to disclaim it. You want to talk to your tax advisor, talk to maybe your legal advisor, but this is the thing. If you're asking to cover that same period of time, like for the PPP and also for unemployment, a couple things to keep in mind. Do you plan to continue to have the business? Because remember, the PPP not only will cover payroll costs, up to 25% can be used for interest on mortgage related to your business, for rent, for utilities for your business. So that's something that I think, you know, you want to weigh out. The other thing is too, there are specific requirements for unemployment under the PUA, and you want to make sure that you kind of understand those. So again, I think one thing a person needs to look at is number one, what is really their intention with their business? Want to be mindful not to create any what could be construed windfall situations, and to get appropriate, professional advice, if they're thinking about doing, both things, that before they do it, that they get professional advice.
Thank you. I also want to add that the city has a list of banks who are processing the PPP applications on our website, which is alamedastrong.org. And Sarah, maybe we can add that to the chat, the list of resources for folks.
Definitely will do.
And I'll add two real quick that are still, as of yesterday, they're taking applications. One is lendistry.com. The other is PayPal. So individuals may want to take a look at that. They are taking applications in anticipation of the opening of the second round. And I was just saying that you want to make sure that before you apply with whichever entity, look at the documents that they are requiring, because one can require different documents. If you have the documents at hand or they're readily available, then that's probably the one that you want to go with. If someone is asking for documents that you don't have prepared, whether it's 2019 tax returns, a 2019 financial statement, and it is going to take time to prepare those, you may not want to go with those. Because remember, for the PPP, whatever participating lender, terms are the same. 1% interest rate, 24-month term. So those terms are the same regardless where you go. So you want to see what is going to be the easiest institution to facilitate, your application.
Here's
So
one
we're
more.
getting close up. Oh, you have one more question? Okay.
Yeah, yes, here's one more question. Do you have any additional information on a possible community match for the city's awesome new grant program?
I'll kind of jump in there. When we discussed the grant, one of the ideas that came from the mayor is she had a contact, in the nonprofit world that was willing to provide some grant money. So we're going to have a bigger discussion on that at the next council meeting. But part of the direction we gave to staff was to see if there are other nonprofits that would be willing to match some of those grants. So I guess the answer is yes, stay tuned. I appreciate, anybody that's stepping up to help our small businesses, with grant money or nonprofit matches.
And I would just like to add that I think part of this is about utilizing all of our city resources to make sure that we can see if there's folks that we can get to partner with. There have been some folks that have approached various members of the council, the mayor, with a willingness to contribute. So we certainly want to build off of that. And I also have been hearing from some of our small businesses doing similar things that folks in other cities are doing. I know that a couple of them are looking at doing some shirts and things like that to drive awareness to the campaign. In some other cities, they've done that with some of the proceeds going into the fund, but then also just to raise public awareness. I think it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that we take care of each other. And I think those sorts of campaigns have been really successful. We actually did something similar with the masks. We've got folks in the community stepping up. We've also had people step in and donate. The president of our school board, Mia Bonta, has stepped up and gotten donations. I've gotten donations. And through that, we were able to launch a buy one, get one program, which is going to provide masks to a lot of our families. And we're doing that through a small business. And that same small business is looking to work with, I think it's the Downtown Alameda Business Association, and which they're a member of, as well as some of the other business associations, to see if there's a way that they can kind of get it going in terms of fundraising to add to those funds.
I think we had a question for Steve, and then I'll kind of chime in after that.
Here's one last question for you, Stephen. What about unemployed from mid-March to April? is it okay to apply because it's a different, you know, because the time period has shifted?
So again, I'm going to defer to the EDD site, but just in general, when you look at the PUA, they're looking at Corona-related events. So again, to go through and see if that's applicable, because you have two forms of potential assistance, one through the EDD, but the PUA, that's like a supplement, but the PUA has specific criteria. So I would defer that to the EDD.
So I think we're getting close to our time and want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'll let the Assembly member close, but before that, I want to say thank you to everyone who participated. These town halls and the others that our colleagues are having are going to be posted on the city's website. So anyone who couldn't make it, you know, could listen to the information that was provided. Just want to give a shout out to Sarah. I don't know if you can tell, but she's at our Emergency Operations Center, you know, where she's camped out. You know, there's usually a half dozen folks there. So, you know, if you can afford it, maybe you want to send them some donuts for breakfast or something for lunch or something for dinner, you know, a way to support your hardworking city staff as well as, you know, support a local business. Lois Butler is also on the call, and, you know, Lois and Economic Development, you know, they're working day and night to try to, you know, find solutions. You know, this is, you know, fast moving. We're all trying to react to it. And I don't think anyone on our staff has taken a breath in probably 2 months. You know, and that's the same for our council members. So just trust that we're working the best we can, but, you know, we don't have all the ideas and we don't have all of the answers. So if you have suggestions, if you have questions, please keep sending them to us. And, you know, if they belong to a different entity, we'll make sure they get allocated. And I just did want to give a shout out to our amazing team at City Hall that's doing a, you know, yo person's job to deal with this. And it's, you know, not something that they ever thought they would do, but, you know, they all kind of signed up for it when they took the job, that something like this could happen, and they've all, you know, risen to the occasion. And I just have a total appreciation for, you know, everything all of them are doing. So I just want to give a shout out to our team. And, you know, thanks to the business associations that are also working with our staff and, you know, having calls to update their members. And, you know, we're here for you, but, you know, let us know what else you need from us. And, you know, that's all I really want to say. And thanks to my colleague, Ms. Vella, who's, you know, going out and soliciting masks. I think she got a donation of masks from the Eden Healthcare. You know, I was able to go work with her and give out meals, which she's been doing. I did for the first time. I know she's doing a whole host of other things. So, you know, you have elected officials in Malia and John Knox White and Mayor Ashcraft and, you know, everyone else in the city that are just, you know, stepping up. And, you know, I'm very proud to be in Alameda right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Oddie, and thank you to our two guests for joining us today. If anybody has any other questions, I certainly encourage you to reach out to you know, to both Councilmember Oddie and I, and we can try to put you in touch with the right people, as well as reaching out to Assemblymember Bonta's office if there are any constituent issues at the state level. They've been really fantastic about being responsive and helpful to our shared constituents, and I want to thank them for that. I think you know, the moral here is that everything is evolving and changing, and you know, certainly we just need to continue to work together. So thank you so much.
I just want to share a deep thanks to Council Members Vella and Oddie for the invitation, the opportunity to work with you. Again, I think our constituents deserve all levels of government working together hand in hand in partnership to provide the services that they need. Thank you to Mr. Dial for your resources and Ms. Henry for all your great work. I also want to just say a shout out to my district director, Tanya Love. She's provided quite a bit of resources into the chat box. We're going to pull it together and put it into a post that we set up for some of the questions that were raised. I did want to add to one of the questions that was raised earlier about Insurance Commissioner Lotta and some of the premium payments. There's been a 60-day grace period on premiums that he implemented, as well as the return of premiums on 6 lines of insurance. And we'll provide the website for the details to see if you as a business qualify for that. And, you know, we're all trying to figure out the needs of our constituents real time. And And we've provided quite a bit of them at the city, county, state, and federal level for those services and supports that exist. If you're having problems accessing them, you shouldn't. We're here to help you get to the services that are there for you, and the payments, the relief. And if there are other areas that we're missing where we need ongoing solutions, we're here to listen and work to provide those to you. So we're trying to get this together. We know that we're all in this together and looking out for one another. So hang in there. Proud to be an Alamedan and a Californian as well, and appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.